Before this tournament kicked off, nobody gave them a chance. Not one. A team from a cluster of tiny islands in the middle of the Atlantic, 500,000 people, a goalkeeper who plays in the Portuguese second division, drawn into a group with Spain and Uruguay, two former world champions. Everyone looked at that group and wrote them off in about 4 seconds. Cute story, they said. Nice that they qualified. They'll lose all 3 and go home. Pack your bags, Cape Verde. 3 games later, Cape Verde haven't lost a single match, and they're through to the knockout rounds of the World Cup. They finished second in their group, ahead of 2-time world champions Uruguay, ahead of 2034 hosts Saudi Arabia, unbeaten, against a field that should have eaten them alive. So let's talk about the most ridiculous, joyful, completely insane underdog story of this entire World Cup, because what Cape Verde just did genuinely shouldn't be impossible. Start with the sheer scale of what we're dealing with, because the numbers are absurd. Cape Verde is an archipelago of 10 small islands off the west coast of Africa, with a total population of around 525,000 people. That's smaller than most American cities? They're the 3rd smallest nation by population ever to qualify for a World Cup, and now, comfortably, the smallest nation in the history of the entire tournament to ever reach the knockout rounds. A country you could fit into a corner of a single major city just beat some of the biggest footballing nations on the planet at their own game. And if you want the contrast that really drives it home, look at the money. There's a chart going around from The Athletic comparing the squad values at this World Cup. France's squad is worth $1.76 billion. England, $1.58 billion. Spain, the team Cape Verde drew with, $1.42 billion. Portugal, $1.17 billion. On down the list of giants, all of them north of $500 million. And then there's Cape Verde, sitting at the very bottom, with a total squad value of $63.2 million. $63 million. Spain's squad is worth more than 20 times that. Cape Verde didn't bring a worse version of the same thing to this World Cup. They brought a squad that, on paper, belonged in a different sport entirely. And they didn't lose. So how did it actually happen? Let's walk through it, because each game was crazier than the last. It started against Spain, the reigning European champions, packed with Barcelona and Real Madrid talent, the team a lot of people and a lot of computer models picked to win the whole tournament. And Cape Verde held them to a goalless draw. Not a lucky, hang-on-for-dear-life goalless draw, either. A tactical masterclass. They sat in a compact, disciplined shape, refused to take the bait when Spain tried to lure them out of position, and dared the favorites to break them down. Spain had 74% of the ball. They had 27 shots. And they could not score because standing in the way was a 40-year-old goalkeeper named Vozinha, who put on one of the goalkeeping performances of the tournament. The world shrugged and called it a fluke. Spain were just rusty. It won't happen again. Then came Uruguay, and the fluke theory died. Because against 2-time world champions Uruguay, Cape Verde didn't just defend, they went for the throat. Kevin Pina smashed in a long-range free kick to score their first ever World Cup goal and put them ahead. Uruguay hit back with 2 goals before halftime to lead 2-1, and that should have been the end of the fairy tale. Except Cape Verde refused to read the script. Helio Varela pounced on a poor Uruguayan back pass and rolled it into an empty net. 2-2. They didn't park the bus and pray. They took the lead, fell behind and fought back, toe-to-toe with footballing royalty. That's the moment the whole world stopped laughing and started paying attention. Which brought them to the final game against Saudi Arabia, with the knockout rounds on the line. And I will be honest with you, this one was not a classic. 2 limited teams, scrappy football, Very few clear chances. Cape Verde had the better of it. Vozinha made another handful of crucial saves to keep another clean sheet, but it finished 0-0. And here's the beautiful part. As the final whistle blew, Cape Verde's players didn't even know if they were through. They crowded around a single phone in the middle of the pitch, watching the end of the other group game, Spain versus Uruguay, because they needed Uruguay not to win. And when Spain's 1-0 victory was confirmed, the dam broke. Grown men in blue shirts collapsed in tears, hugging, celebrating, because a nation of 500,000 people had just reached the knockout stages of the World Cup on their very first attempt. 3 games, 3 draws, 0 defeats, and second place in a group with 2 former world champions. Drawing all 3 games doesn't always get you through, but this time, it was more than enough. Now here's the thing people need to understand, because there's a lazy take floating around that Cape Verde only got here because FIFA expanded the tournament to 48 teams and watered it down. And that take is wrong. Cape Verde are not charity cases riding an easier format. They won their African qualifying group, finishing ahead of Cameroon, a 5-time African champion and the most experienced World Cup nation on the entire continent. They didn't sneak in through a playoff. And at this World Cup, they didn't crawl through as one of the lucky third-place teams either. They finished second, on merit, unbeaten. They became the 3rd African nation ever to go unbeaten through the group stage on their tournament debut, and the first African debutants to advance from the group since Ghana back in 2006. This isn't luck. This is a properly organized, properly coached football team that earned every inch. And the man who built it knows exactly what it means. Their coach, a man known as Bubista, stood there draped in the Cape Verde flag and said it perfectly. We are a small country, but we fight for the things we want to achieve. He had said before the tournament that everyone is entitled to dream, and nothing is impossible. And then his players went out and proved it. His whole message was that a country can be small, can struggle financially, but if it is resilient, organized, and brave, it can stand shoulder to shoulder with teams full of players worth 100 times more. Once you are on the pitch, he said, a lot of things become equal. Cape Verde just turned that belief into a result the entire world witnessed. But if this story has a face, it belongs to one man, Vozinha, the 40-year-old goalkeeper who has become the breakout star of the entire World Cup, and his backstory makes it even sweeter. This is a guy who didn't even turn professional until he was in his mid-20s, who played last season in the Portuguese second division, who very nearly quit international football altogether after being dropped during a failed Africa Cup of Nations qualifying campaign. And now, he's a global icon. His Instagram following has exploded to over 16 million. In the stands, fans bring giant placards made entirely of his face. Groups of shirtless young men paint the letters VOZINHA across their chests. A kid held up a sign reading, "In Vozinha we trust." When Portugal played in that same Houston stadium days earlier, the crowd roared for Cristiano Ronaldo. For this game, they roared for Vozinha, a second division goalkeeper, outshining one of the most famous athletes alive. And there's a tearjerker inside the tearjerker. Vozinha's mother, Ana Candida Evora, was in the crowd watching her son, something she almost didn't get to do. She missed his star-making 7-save performance against Spain because of visa problems. This time, with her newly issued visa sorted, she sat in a luxury suite waving a tiny Cape Verde flag while the whole stadium chanted her son's name. After everything, Vozinha summed up the entire spirit of his team in one line. "We are small, but we have big hearts, and we are fighters." And he had a message for the doubters too, for everyone who assumed Cape Verdean players just weren't good enough. They came here to show they have quality, that they can compete, that they belong on the biggest stage in the sport. Even their kit tells an underdog story. While more than 3/4 of the teams at this World Cup are dressed by Nike, Adidas, or Puma, Cape Verde are outfitted by a small New York company called Capelli Sport, run by a Lebanese immigrant who arrived in the United States in the 1980s and built the business up from a Brooklyn basement. Two underdogs finding each other, both at their first World Cup. Their blue shirts even feature a triangular pattern based on the flight paths between the islands. They called it Connected Through Rhythm. Everything about this team is a story about punching above your weight. So what happens next? Well, the fairy tale gets its toughest test imaginable, because waiting for Cape Verde in the round of 32 in Miami on July 3rd are the reigning world champions, Lionel Messi and Argentina, the greatest player of all time, the defending champions, against the smallest nation ever to reach this stage. On paper, it's a mismatch of cosmic proportions. The realistic expectation is that this is where the dream ends. But then, be honest, what about anything Cape Verde has done so far has been realistic? As their midfielder Deroy Duarte put it after making history, "It's mad. I feel like I'm in a dream." It's against Argentina, isn't it? A tough match, but let's believe anything is possible. And their defender Pico Lopez drove it home. They got here on merit. They belong at this level. And they're not done proving it. That's the magic of this whole thing. A nation of 525,000 people, a second division goalkeeper, a $63 million squad, a tiny New York kit maker, all of it colliding into one of the most beautiful stories football has produced in years. They were supposed to be the easy 3 points. Instead, they're the team nobody wants to play, and the team the entire neutral world is now falling in love with. One woman in the crowd held up a sign that said it better than anyone: "Small islands, big dreams." Cape Verde versus Messi's Argentina. Do the Blue Sharks have one more shock left in them? Or is this where the fairy tale finally runs out? Let me know who you're backing in the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss whatever this team does next.